Good morning. Welcome to the April 27th, 2021 Board of Police Commissioners meeting. We acknowledge that we're on the traditional lands of Treaty 4 territory, a treaty signed with 35 First Nations across southern Saskatchewan, parts of Alberta and Manitoba, the original lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. To ensure social distancing measures are being met during this time, members of the Commission are attending the meeting today through video conferencing, with the exception of Commissioner Yee, who will be absent. I would like to remind those members who are attending through video conferencing of the following. Please ensure your video and microphone are turned off. If you wish to speak, you enter the name in the chat window in order to be placed in the speaking queue. And when speaking, please remember to unmute your microphone and enable your video camera. I'd like approval of the public agenda. Can I have someone make a motion to approve, please? Commissioners, I'm just going to ask if you can hear me.
Oh, hold on a second.
Do I have to say that all again?
Stop on the phone. Okay, we're good.
What's that?
Okay.
Could I get a motion to approve the public agenda, or the public agenda, please?
Nepal.
Thank you, Commissioner Boucher. I'll call the question. Anyone opposed? Carried. Approval of the minutes. Can I have someone make a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting held on March 30th, 2021?
Andrew, so moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. Any errors or omissions? I'll call the question. Anyone opposed? Carried. Our first report is PO 21-13, the Victim Services Unit. Chief, could you please introduce the report? I'll turn your microphone on any second now. I swear I will. There we go.
Great. Thank you very much. And good morning, Mayor Masters and all members of our board. Thank you very much. This first report today is our Victim Services Unit. As you know, each month we try and give our board and anyone that attends these meetings a glimpse into different sections and areas within our police service. We've got a couple of areas that we're featuring this morning, and the first of which is Victim Services. So we've got Ms. Stephanie O'Soup with us this morning. Stephanie is our manager of Victim Services, and I'm going to turn it over to Steph to walk us through this report.
Thank you. Good morning. I'll get right into it. I have limited time. I'm the coordinator of the Victim Services Unit at the Regina Police Service, and our mandate is to assist victims of crime or traumatic events with information, support, and referral services. Now, not everyone is a victim of a crime, but they might have had a sudden death in their family or completed suicide, so something that's non-criminal can be very traumatic to them. We first started this unit in 1988. Regina Police Service was actually the very first police service actually in the province to have something like this. They knew and saw the need that we had to reach out to people who have been victimized and affected in our community. And it wasn't until 1993, that the Regina Police Service entered into a partnership with what was then known as Saskatchewan Justice. In 1994, the Aboriginal Resource Officer Program started and has since been renamed to the Indigenous Resource Officer Program. And in 2012, we added on two very important roles and programs, the Missing Persons Liaison and the Victim Services Responder. So we reach out to victims of crime and traumatic events. We provide police investigative updates. We work very closely with the investigators that are assigned the files that come in. We'll provide court updates to victims should charges be laid in a matter. If an accused person is told to stay away from a victim, we will provide copies of release documents to that person. And we refer to community agencies that they need at that time to get through what they have to get through. We do attend court with victims of all different kinds of crime. In the event of homicide, we will attend with the family to the courts and provide them and carry on like we usually would with investigative and court updates. Our year runs from April to March, but I wanted to be able to illustrate the effect, the detrimental effect that COVID has had on our unit. In 2019, you'll see that 1,255 files were opened, and it kind of has a breakdown of crimes against person, property, and other cases. So when you go to 2020, you'll see that only 314 files were opened, and you'll understand why as I carry on through the presentation. In our unit, we have 6 full-time employees. I'm the coordinator that takes care of the 4 programs that are under the Victim Services umbrella. There's 2 Indigenous resource officers, 1 missing persons liaison, and 1 victim services responder, and 1 support staff that kind of takes care of all of our needs. We do have 17 volunteers, 14 of whom are active. However, because of COVID, they have not been in the unit since March of 2020. So that's where our numbers have fallen drastically. These volunteers carry their own dedicated caseloads of up to 15 files, and they're coming in weekly and giving the hours out of their day and out of their week to give to the community of Regina. So as the unit head, I oversee the supervision of 4 programs: the General Victim Services, the Indigenous Resource, Victim Service Responder, and Missing Persons Liaison. I do the staff and volunteer training. I will do the reporting, the necessary reporting, the monthly stats, the mid-year and the year-end stats to the Ministry of Justice, Victim Services Branch. I do the file distribution, so I'll read reports daily and decide by prioritizing which ones that we can reach out to or try to reach out to. And I participate in various presentations. So all of the programs under Victim Services provide that our mandate of providing support and information and referral services. However, there's some specialized programs that we do have. The Indigenous Resource Officers, their mandate is to reach out to those people in our community that are Indigenous. They're very different because cultural practices are respected. There's an example there. We might have a file closed, but if we have committed, or that Indigenous Resource Officer is committed to attending a yearly feast for a person that has been the victim of a homicide and a file has been closed, they carry through that commitment. So that's very different. They might not want to see a traditional counselor, so we try to get them connected to maybe an elder in their community. So just the same services, just a little bit different with specialties. Missing Persons Liaison. Rhonda Fiddler is our missing person. She started in 2012 as a contract position, and that became permanent in 2018. Her caseload, her mandate are the long-term missing persons, not necessarily the runaways, but we think of people like Tamara Keepness or people that have been missing for 60 plus years. There's always family members and the next generation that is interested in knowing what happened to their loved one. And she keeps very close contact with a lot of families in our community and outside of our community. A lot of people move away. The Victim Services Responders, Erica Shank, and she's housed out of the Regina Children's Justice Center. Her specialty is dealing with child victims of crime. So she has immediate connection with the police officer and social work teams that are housed out of there, and she'll be able to have first contact with parents and be able to provide them the services that they need to get their family through their situation. Of course, volunteers, we know in every area, are vital to any program. And as I stated before, they have not been in the unit since 2020, so there was a drastic decrease in files opened. It can be very disheartening to have to prioritize one file over the other, but we try to get to as much as we can. I also wanted to illustrate that a file isn't just an open and closed thing. For example, we had a domestic homicide in May of 2011, and the file only concluded in July of 2019. That's 8 years that we dealt with that family, walking them through the investigative process, the court process, the sentencing. But not only that, when they were released, or the accused was released, the offender, we were able to get them connected with the Federal Corrections Canada Victim Services, so then they're still kept update on the offender during that parole time. So it's a very voluntary program. No one has to be involved with us, it's just an added support, and maybe a lot of them don't know anything about the justice system. It can be very difficult for them to navigate, so we try to assist them through that. I'm hoping by this fall or earlier, we are able to get our volunteers back. We have the interest there. There are people waiting to be cleared, and they are cleared just like any employee of the Regina Police Service is, because they are reading and dealing with sensitive material. And I can honestly say that Regina Police Service is very, very supportive of our unit and the role that we play. We're very closely connected to the investigators. We're able to provide families with updates when an investigator is just, quite frankly, too busy to get to them. And so we try to take that from them and assist them in that way also. Thank you. So,
Thank you very much. Councillor Bresciani, you have a question?
Thank you. Yeah, I will move this report as well. Through you, Madam Mayor, just wanted to know in regards to the volunteers, what kind of training or background do they need to have for this, and how do they apply for that, I guess?
you can be any member of the public. You don't need a specific background. We always tell people you need a good ear and to have empathy. We do the on-site training. That's directed by the Ministry of Justice, and consistently ongoing training in that. And they come into the office. So we do in-office and then team training. So anyone from our community can do it.
Okay, great. That's great. I guess the last question I have is, we did have a young man come forward at budget time and shared his personal story about his mom was I guess, a victim of domestic violence. And the concern is that there was no support after. So after it happened, I guess the question is, would that be an example where victim services would come in and help the family make sure that, it doesn't reoccur, or they walk the family through, this is not reoccurring? That was kind of what we heard from his story, that there was more needed in that area. Would this be victim services, or how would a situation like that, would it fall here, or would it go to another area? Through the chair.
I apologize. I should have been clear. We do not, in our unit, we don't deal with interfamilial violence, domestic violence, because there are specialized units in the city. So the only time we deal with a domestic violence situation is in the event, sadly, of a homicide. We are closely connected with Family Service Regina, who has the domestic violence early intervention program and the outreach program.
Okay, great. Thank you. This was very interesting, and thank you for the work that the unit does. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Commissioner Bither.
Hi, good morning. Stephanie, thanks for the presentation. It was really great. I do have a question. You mentioned about the Ministry of Justice. So my understanding is that there is a victim services unit or branch at Justice. So how does RPS work with those partners, and is there any overlap between the two, or what's your position on that?
Definitely there's overlap. They're a funding partner, so every 3 years there's contracts that are provided, but the Ministry of Justice Victim Services branch acknowledges that the Regina Police Service is our employer. So they won't interfere in policy procedure of our employer, but they do provide training to all victim services in the province. So we try to get together once or twice a year, and it's been virtually this past year, as everything has been. But they provide separate training that our police service doesn't, and the police service provides training that nobody else would get. So yeah, they're essentially our funding partner.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Bither. Commissioner Boucher did have a comment that brilliant work, Stephanie, and your team.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the Commission? All right, we have a motion on the floor to receive and file. I apologize. Chief, would you like to speak?
Well, I had actually was just going to add in, and I think Stephanie covered it, that a lot of our referrals when it comes to domestic conflict is through Family Service Regina. So Victim Service tends to work on other crimes that are not domestic related. So Family Service Regina, as she mentioned, is really our partner. And in fact, every domestic conflict that we investigate is forwarded to our partners at Family Service Regina, which of course is not attached to our police service, but is a separate entity in the community. And they do a lot of that good work and outreach with regard to domestics. But while I've just, got the mic to just wrap up, we greatly appreciate the work this team does. Stephanie and her team in Victim Services really, I can't say enough about how meaningful the outreach is and how many incredible stories. When we're getting thank you letters and cards from families of murder victims thanking our police service, and often it's Stephanie and her team for the incredible work that they're doing, that they are making a difference. That family is involved in an extremely traumatic situation, and yet the ability for our victim service team to ease that pain, help them understand what can be a very complicated process is such a valuable asset for our police service. So I appreciate the work that Stephanie and her team do very much.
Thank you, Chief. And thank you, Stephanie, for the presentation and for the work that you do.
Thank you.
I think I can honestly say we all look forward to your getting back up to full force in terms of your volunteer commitment as well.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions or comments, I'll call the question. Anyone opposed? Carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to consider PO 21-14, which is professional standards section. Chief, could I ask that you please introduce the report?
Great, thank you very much, Mayor Masters. So again, this is an informational report that we wanted to provide in the public session. Professional standards, which essentially handles public complaints that come into our police service and works collaboratively with the Public Complaints Commission, is I think it's a very important piece of information that we provide publicly. I know we've had some good discussions with the board around process and around how things work, and we thought this would be a very good opportunity to give you an inside look at that and have a couple of our experts present. I will say Inspector Trent Stevely, who's always present at our meetings, is the inspector in charge of our professional standards section. And we have Staff Sergeant Blair Eckert with us via video conference today. And Staff Sergeant Eckert is going to walk us through this presentation and this report. So I'll turn it over to Blair.
Thanks, Chief. Good morning, Mayor Masters and members of the board. Hopefully you can hear me. Currently, our professional standards section consists of Staff Sergeant in charge, which is myself. We also have two sergeants who are our main investigators, and we work closely in conjunction with Ms. Katrina Swan, who is our legal counsel. We report directly to the executive officer and to Chief Bray. The purpose of professional standards, of course, is to evaluate and conduct investigations into alleged misconduct by our RPS employees. We also provide education to our employees centered on professionalism, ethics, integrity. We also maintain a cohesive and transparent working relationship with the Public Complaints Commission, or otherwise known as the PCC. We try and be as thorough and respectful and beyond reproach in all those investigations that we undertake. We also try and be proactive in our efforts to reduce those public complaints. Some of the ways we are proactive are we conduct presentations to all members of our service and block training on a yearly basis. Obviously, COVID has thrown a wrench into those plans, but that's something we will continue to work towards in the following years. There has been a movement towards resolving some of those complaints, not just through the formal process, but also through an informal resolution process. And I'll touch on that a little bit later in the presentation. Also, we conduct numerous presentations at the Saskatchewan Police College to our recruits, as well as our experienced members in the traffic section, our communication officers and detention officers. We typically respond to incidents of unacceptable employee behavior in order that we can correct that behavior and reduce any risk. There are three types of complaints. The first type is a service complaint. So that's one that concerns essentially the policies or service provided by the Regina Police Service. Second complaint is what we consider an internal complaint. Obviously, that is something, it could be something as simple as a supervisor observing inappropriate behavior, and we'll bring that matter forward and an initial investigation will take place. And lastly, we'll deal with the public complaint, which is a complaint submitted by a member of the public. There are certain ways a member can submit their complaint. One is through the Public Complaints Commission. Second is through a police service, a special investigations unit of FSIN. They can submit it through the board office of the affected police service, to the affected police service itself, or detachment of the RCMP. And the public has approximately 12 months to file that complaint unless the PCC or Public Complaints Commission is deems it to be extended based on public interest. So the public complaint process, so essentially the complainant will fill out what we call a Form F, or a public complaint Form F. And they will attach a written statement with that document and submit that to the Public Complaints Commission. Public Complaints Commission will review that information and they'll forward that to professional standards. At which point I'll receive the information. I'll start conducting an initial investigation. So I could be reviewing police reports, reviewing witness statements, looking at computer details, obtaining any video that might be necessary, such as detention video, in-car camera video, or even looking at GPS coordinates if applicable. Once that investigative package is complete, that will get forwarded to the executive officer and Chief Bray for their review. When they're done with that, that package will then get forwarded back to the Public Complaints Commission. It's important to know that the PCC, they really have authority over all of the public complaints. And when they receive that information, they can direct the investigation be conducted by themselves, because they also have investigators. They can send it back to us so we can conduct the investigation. Or if there's a conflict of interest or high-profile case, they may have another police service conduct that investigation. So the public complaint can either be criminal or it can be administrative in nature, which falls under the Police Act. If it is criminal, obviously the members' charter rights apply. They are entitled to legal representation. If it's administrative in nature, again, it falls under the Police Act. Their charter rights do not apply, but those members are expected to participate fully and truthfully, and that also includes witness officers. Any completed criminal investigations or areas where we feel charges may be warranted must be sent to the Crown prosecutors for their opinion. So we will not lay any charges without the recommendation of the prosecutors. Any completed administrative investigations will be sent to the Public Complaints Commission. And the Police Act allegations can either be one of three things. They can be substantiated, so the evidence supports the allegations. They can be unsubstantiated, so the allegation cannot be proven or disproved. And they can be unfounded, so essentially anything is unsupported by that evidence. And what happens when an allegation is substantiated is the Chief of Police has some options available to himself. One is an advice to future conduct. And now that is not disciplinary in nature, and it's not retained on the member's personnel record, but it's more of an opportunity to really coach and counsel that member and try and correct that inappropriate behavior. The second way is a remedial order, which is disciplinary in nature. And there could be several conditions attached to that, such as time off with or without pay, extra training may be required, and so on and so forth. And the last is a dismissal. So that falls under Section 60 of the Police Act. And that's where a member is deemed to be unsuitable for becoming a police or maintaining their credibility as a police officer. Now, I touched a little bit about informal resolution before, and under the Police Act, it does outline provisions which basically allow a less serious complaint to be handled in an informal manner. Now, there's certain benefits to doing that. Obviously, there's an increased exchange of dialogue, so it allows for better understanding between everyone involved. It's really a learning opportunity for both the complainant and the subject officer. It provides each party somewhat with a sense of empowerment, so they really control that process, and they can arrive at a positive resolution together. Successful resolution obviously can have a positive impact, not just on the participants, but their family, friends, and really the community as a whole.
Staff Sergeant Eckert, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but we've lost you.
A message, the power just went out at the police service, which is problematic. Someone forgot to pay a bill. So we have a generator, and obviously it's going to kick in. The problem with our emergency power supply at the police service is that it doesn't necessarily, it'll fire up the essential areas, but doesn't always fire up everybody's workstation. We obviously make sure we can run patrol, detention, our communication center, and so there may be some work done. As you can see, Laura Lee is now waiting in the lobby. People will have to log back in, so.
We'll give them a minute to get
We
back
can
online.
give them a minute to get back in. Yeah, we've got all that construction going on out in front of the office, so I'm not saying that has caused it, but it could be something that tripped
We
power
did
supply.
lose Juliette Boucher as well, however, so I'm wondering
Okay.
if we don't have a bigger problem.
Sure.
Commissioners, if you just give us another moment, we'll see about the rest of the folks from the police commission, or the police service, get back online here.
So we just have someone physically going upstairs, searching in the dark to find Blair Eckert, and we'll get him back on. If not by phone, we'll get him back online here.
Thanks, Commissioner Boucher. We're just missing a few members of the RPS. The power went out at the police station as well. So we're just waiting for Staff Sergeant to come back online.
I think Staff Sergeant Eckert was actually very close to the end of his presentation. There was not a lot left, so if you want to give it a couple more minutes, see if we can get him back online. He can finish up and then answer any questions that may come up. So I think what we'll do, part of the problem Blair is having is getting, because his computer, he's in an area that isn't deemed like essential in terms of power supply. Priority, like I mentioned, would be detention comm center. So he runs on a different power grid, and as a result, he's having problems getting onto his computer where his presentation is. He was very close to done his presentation. However, he could call in, we could get him on the phone, and he could take some questions and perhaps supplement anything that he might have from there. I'm just getting updates here from the office.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Paul.
I don't think so. Laura Lee Davies has phoned in, I believe. Yeah, so I think they've got the number there. They can pass it along to Staff Sergeant Eckert. Oh, look who we got.
Welcome back, Staff Sergeant.
Sorry about that. We had a power outage here, so
No apology
I'm sitting in
necessary.
my office in the dark.
You're welcome to continue, sir.
All right. So I was talking about informal resolution before. We talked about it. It has a positive impact, not just on the participants, but their family, friends, community as a whole. It also really decreases the amount of time it takes to resolve that public complaint. So it's a really good option for us. So when the complaint comes in, it's evaluated by us, and we determine if it meets the criteria, to proceed with informal resolution. Obviously, consent must be gained from the complainant and the subject officers involved. And what happens is basically an agreement is drafted between the complainant and the subject officer. And it's something that both parties can agree upon, and they're each provided with a copy. And then that copy is provided to the Public Complaints Commission. And we'll also keep a copy here at the Professional Standards Office. So some examples of conduct which may be suitable for the informal resolution are discreditable conduct that doesn't involve a breach of trust, potentially any allegations of unfair, biased treatment, rude or profane language, possibly any damage to clothing or property that results from an arrest. Now, there are certain complaints of a more serious nature, such as deceit, corruption, incidents involving firearms or conducted energy weapons, or anything criminal that obviously would not classify as an informal resolution. So when we look at the bigger picture, as with any policing organization, the professional and ethical behavior of the organization's employees are really essential in building trust and confidence within the community. So public complaints, they can erode the value of the community, or that the community places upon that police service. Every effort needs to be made to act really quickly and efficiently when we receive those complaints. And we need to take proactive steps to educate, promote ethical and professional behavior in our employees. I know we stress to our employees all the time that police officer is never off duty. It's 24/7, 365 days a year. Chief Bray can attest to this. Police officers are continuously subject to a tremendous amount of scrutiny day in and day out. honesty, integrity, judgment, professionalism. They're all required by our members, and we value those core responsibilities. In wrapping up, society really expects and deserves that high standard of honesty and trustworthiness and integrity from the police service. We occupy a position of trust. We have a special role in the community, and we're given certain authorities. Any breach in that trust can lose society's confidence and impair the ability, really, of the police force to function effectively. It's really easy to lose that trust and respect of the public, and extremely difficult to regain that. So thank you for your time. I'll open it up to any questions. You can direct them to either Chief Bray or myself, and we'll answer them as best as we can.
Thank you very much, Staff Sergeant. Do any members of the commission have any questions? Councillor Stevens?
Thank you. Very much appreciate the presentation. If I could, I just want to be confident in my understanding of how the whole structure works. So the professional standards section is composed entirely of officers within the RPS. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And the PC, which exists at a higher level, does it have sworn officers, or is it entirely civilian?
To my understanding, they're all civilian. I can't speak directly to the Public Complaints Commission, and they were actually unavailable to attend today to help answer some of the questions.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering if perhaps you could provide some guidance on how substantiated complaints are addressed in the long term. So you've mentioned 3 possibilities. There's advice from the chief, remedial, or dismissal. With advice that would not go on an employment record, how would that then factor into the exercise of progressive discipline? So if an officer is found guilty of certain offenses, but they're only offered advice, how do you build on that record to ensure that they're actually improving?
I'm sorry, Councillor, is this a question for myself or Chief Bray?
For you, actually.
Well, again, like I reiterate, it isn't considered discipline. Some factors are taken into consideration if there's a pattern of behavior. Obviously, it's repetitive in nature. Obviously, that will factor into a decision. If there's a second incident, that Chief Bray may sort of up the ante to a remedial order. And that's something maybe he can comment on a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to jump in as well. Back to your question, Councillor Stevens, about the Public Complaints Commission. So they are independent of a police agency, and they do not, to my knowledge, they do not have like special constable designation or status. They have hired various different people over the years. Some retired RCMP members have worked there. Some retired municipal police officers have worked there. They also have people appointed to the board, like the commission itself. So the investigators that they have, when they take on an investigation, to date, most of those, and this dates back I don't even know, 15 years, I think, that the PCC has been around. To date, their investigators have all been retired or former police officers or people with an investigative background that have worked in some form of investigations. However, the people that are on the actual board of, or the provincial Public Complaints Commission are not police officers. They are civilian members at large from our community. They review all of the files, all of the investigations, and it's through that group that recommendations come forward in terms of the finding of a file, whether it's found as substantiated, unsubstantiated, or unfounded, if that answers that part of the question. And with regard to the question about advice to future conduct, just because it's not on a person's discipline record doesn't mean that we don't have a record of it. So we have a robust system at the police service where essentially it would, it's a bit of a red flag system. If we see someone who's had multiple complaints against them, if we've resolved the complaint through advice to future conduct, even though it's not considered discipline, it can come up at a discipline hearing that person has been given advice to future conduct. So it's not considered discipline, but it's not completely wiped off the record, and it definitely is considered when we're making decisions if there was a future incident or something of a similar or completely different nature that occurs. We can take that into consideration, as does the PCC when they're making a determination as to what next steps look like.
Okay, thank you. My next question is actually about the outcome. So as I understand it, since 2011, there have been about 158 substantiated complaints against members of the RPS. Can you provide a general breakdown of how many consequences there have been? So there's 158 complaints. How many of these turned into some form of advice, remedial action, or discipline?
I don't have that number off the top of my head. I'm just looking at Katrina Swan, legal counsel. I know we could get that number. We could get that information for you. I don't know what the breakdown is. Obviously, we consider the circumstances when we determine what level we're going to enter into discipline or remedial efforts. And so I don't have the breakdown. If it's something more minor, and I'm just speaking in general terms, something that we feel can be handled through an advice to future conduct, then it will be handled that way. However, if we feel it's a substantial breach, if it's something that could have consequences on our police service or negative consequences going forward, we consider that to be something we would handle with a remedial order. Just because we offer a remedial order, it's really an opportunity to sit down with the member and say, here's what's happened, here's what's gone wrong, here's the expected behavior, and this is what we're proposing in terms of discipline going forward. If the member does not agree with that, they have the ability to take it to an independent hearing officer, and then it would be heard by a third-party independent person, and that person would make a determination as to what the discipline and the outcome is. So I'm just giving you a little bit of a deeper dive into the rationale behind it. In terms of the actual numbers, though, Councillor, I don't have that off the top of my head.
No, fair enough. If possible, it would be appreciated if at least a memo could be sent to the Board of Police Commissioners with that data, if possible. No rush, but it would be interesting to know.
Okay.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Any other members of the board? Hearing none, I have a few. On the public complaint process, initiation of a public complaint, there are 6 things listed from straight to the office of the Public Complaint Commission to to a detachment of the RCMP. Is there any avenue you feel is missing, or is this quite comprehensive in terms of the many ways either the public or a police service member could file a complaint?
Well, I was at the table when this was put together. I sat as the president of the Saskatchewan Federation of Police Officers, and I can tell you that there was a lot of community consultation done. In fact, as a standing regular member of our committee to develop this, Lawrence Joseph was at the table from FSIN, and FSIN played a significant role in the development of this public complaints process. And that is why you see them figured prominently throughout this process. They are an entity that can take complaints, and so sometimes the complaint may not come to them directly, but they may hear of a complaint. They will go out, do some further investigation, and then bring that complaint forward. So it is a mechanism that is used. They also have observer status through investigations, and that can be activated as well. So, I think when the process was being stood up, there was some efforts made to try and find a way that we're not just asking a person to come back to the police service that they might have a complaint about to make their complaint. You can go to another police agency, but if you're not comfortable doing that, which we recognize there are lots of people that might not be, then there are independent bodies that can take that complaint in ways that you can file it. Now with online complaints, I know in the conversations and presentations that I've seen the Public Complaints Commission make, they receive a lot of their complaints through the online portal directly to them. And then knowing that they ultimately have the carriage of all public complaints against police officers in the province, that's probably the best conduit in terms of getting that handled.
Thank you. In terms of the public complaint process, one of the items in terms of the process is that the complainant submits a written statement. Given some of the RPS's focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion, is there ever an issue with language as a barrier when it comes to written statements?
Yes, definitely, and there's lots of ways and processes in place where it can be a verbal statement that we will have written for them. We have translator services available. I know that the Public Complaints Commission has offered and uses that as well, if that is a necessary part of the investigation. So that can definitely be accommodated.
Thank you. Not quite done. On the stats from 2011 to 2020, I just actually am seeking a bit of clarification. A complaint versus an allegation. An allegation is a public complaint lodged by a member of the public, but a complaint can be internal or a service. Is that correct?
Well, I think a complaint can take on a couple of different forms. It can be about an individual, it can be about a service, but we can have, complaint and allegation to me are, they're maybe interchangeable. If someone has an allegation of a service complaint, for example, that they aren't happy with a process that we have at the police service, it's not specific to one officer, but it is, a concern or a complaint that they have. Whereas if it's about an individual officer, I think we, in those cases, maybe more often use allegation until it's investigated to be proven one way or the other, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And in terms of the substantiated complaints, would substantiation require it to be transferred into the PCC?
No, they all go through the PCC, so they all have to go to the PCC first, and then, as Blair mentioned, the Public Complaints Commission makes the determination, we're going to investigate it, or you can. And sometimes it comes down to the resources, are there investigators have too many investigations and they need another agency to do it. Sometimes it may be a fairly simple investigation and they'll turn it over to an agency to do. But after that investigation is done, it goes back to the PCC, and they're the ones that make the determination as to whether it's founded, unfounded, or unsubstantiated.
Thank you. And in terms of substantiated, are these numbers both the internal and public complaints?
Yes, all complaints.
Thank you. I think that's what I got. I'm good. I have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Paul to receive and file the report. One moment, please. I see Councillor Bresciani is typing.
Thank you, Mayor Masters. I was just going to follow up on just one question that you had asked. Can I just ask, do we ever do a comparison of the number of complaints that we do get in against or for officers compared to other other municipalities in that regard as well? Like, just how do we know how we're doing through the chair?
Yeah, it's not attached to this, though, is it? No. Okay. Okay, sorry. So that is reported on annually. The Public Complaints Commission does an annual report. In fact, if you go on their website, it's posted on their annual reports, and it gives the breakdown of complaints by municipality in the province, and gives some information in terms of the volume of complaints, how many were substantiated, that kind of a breakdown. And they've been doing that. I believe you can go back and look at their reports over the last number of years.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bresciani. Seeing no further comments, I'll ask the question. Any opposed to the receive and file of this information report? Hearing none, carried. We'll now consider PO 21-15, 2020 District Year-End Reports. Chief, could you please introduce the report?
Sure. So these district reports we give to the Board of Police Commissioners on an annual basis. They are authored and presented this morning by the inspectors in charge of the 3 patrol districts of our police service. There is a lot of information in these reports, and we're going to give you a brief overview of the 3 districts. So we won't be going into extreme detail, but there is good detail in the reports. So I would encourage you, if you haven't had a chance to look through them, to please do that. In the reports, you'll see a 2020 breakdown of statistics by district. You'll see a 3-year comparison. So what did that district look like last year and the year before, and how have we compared? You'll see a district to district comparison. So the 3 districts in our city are North, Central, and South. So the proportion of crime that happens in the south compared to the rest of the city, you'll see that comparison. And then each district within our community services division has different areas or sections that work within that district. And so each of these inspectors this morning are going to be able to give you a bit of a breakdown of those specialty sections that they also oversee, as well as the patrol area, the geographic area of our city, and a bit about what their function is. So we have 3 presenters that hopefully are not in the dark. I'm crossing my fingers that we'll get them up on the screen. We're going to start with the North District and Inspector Audra Young.
Good morning. I'm hoping you can see me. I believe this light shows me in the best way, so I appreciate the power being out here. So as the chief had said, good morning, Mayor Masters, members of the board, councillors Stevens and Bresciani. I am Audra Young. I'm the inspector in charge of the North District at the Regina Police Service. I'm here to provide you with the overview of our work in the North District from 2020. I work with a great team. I have a staff sergeant. Her name is Laurel Marshall, and she's my partner. Together, we provide leadership and support to the officers assigned to the North District. There are 4 frontline patrol shifts. This includes 4 sergeants, 4 corporals, and the 40-plus constables assigned to each of those teams. As well as we have the traffic safety unit with 1 sergeant, 2 traffic safety unit teams in and of itself, led by 2 corporals and 11 constables. We also have 1 constable who provides the support of collision and alcohol coordination, along with administrator to the DRE program. And we also have the combined traffic safety services. We have 2 teams with 1 sergeant, a corporal, and 8 constables. And rounding out our team in the North District is the Crime Stoppers Coordinator Community Programs Constable Rob Haraldson. So our geographical location of the North District includes everything within the city limits north of the CP rail, with the exception of the North Central community. You could say we're the lesser known area known as north of CP. The North District is divided into 3 zones: Northwest, Northeast, and West. These zones in and of itself are divided into smaller atoms, and officers assigned to the North District are assigned to those specific zones and atoms in order to enhance the geographical ownership and provide more effective response to calls for service and other community concerns in those areas. The reports as provided for all the districts are provided by tactical analysts who report on crime trends and collect data for us on a timely basis. It's reported daily in order for us to focus our efforts on hotspots in the city. And this information also provides our staff sergeants to effectively direct resources and develop strategies in order to respond to concerns within the community. We also have a community crime report through our records management system, and it allows us to compare crime, see how we're doing from year to year, and understand that we can strategize to effectively navigate through some of those issues. Crimes against property. Property crime in North District in 2020 accounted for 28.5% of reported property crime in the city of Regina. This is down 0.5% from 2019. And of the 3 zones in North District, the Northwest zone accounted for the highest number of events at 47.4% of all property crime within that district. The Northwest is behind that in 37.2%, and then lesser still in the West zone with 15.4%. The property crimes 3-year comparison with break and enter, theft from auto, theft of auto mischief offenses, we're down in the North District as compared to 2019. Crimes against person. The crimes against person in the North District in 2020 accounted for 27.9% of reported crimes against persons in the city of Regina. Of the three zones, the Northwest Zone accounted for the highest number of events at 47.8%, and the Northeast Zone had 30.8%, following behind with the West Zone as the fewest number of reported crimes against person in the district at 21.4%. In 2020, the North District saw a 0.5% decrease in all assaults and a 29.9% decrease in robberies compared to 2019. 26.7% of all crime reported in Regina occurred in the North District. This is consistent with the numbers we've seen in 2019. I'd like to speak about the traffic safety unit. I want to draw your attention to your report on page 9. There are errors that contained in that. I would like to correct the fact that there is one sergeant assigned to the traffic safety unit along with those other members as I described earlier, as well as the last sentence is that we provided 24 two-hour presentations in 2018, though that is certainly true. It is not true in 2018. In 2020, we provided 10 presentations. So again, in that unit, there is one sergeant, 2 corporals, 11 constables. The constable provides the support for the alcohol coordination and administration for the DRE program, along with collision support and analysis, Regina Police Service issued 41,000 thereabouts summary offense tickets. 14,000, 15,000 average were issued directly, not average, 14,678 were issued directly by members. 10,428 were issued by the traffic safety unit, and the remainder, 15,885, were attributed to the CTSS unit, SROs, front desk, and other traffic-related projects. With the traffic safety unit, we have a number of community partners, one being City of Regina Traffic Safety. We support the work that's done there through intersection safety projects and overdrive projects. So these are focused enforcements towards high volume traffic areas, high collision intersections, and areas around social drinking establishments. You'll see through my report all of the data contained with the statistical information. We also have another partner very important to us is SGI. We participate in the STEP program, which is Selective Enforcement Program, and our officers attend throughout locations in the province, partnered with other police services to focus on traffic safety. We also have high visibility projects where high volume traffic in known drinking establishments, we operate on enforcement there. And then we also participate in the Driving Without Impairment program, which is funded by the SGI. In 2020, we provided 8 2 to 3 hour presentations. Unfortunately, due to pandemic, the program was halted and hopefully to commence this year. We have done 2 to this point. The Automated Speed Enforcement Program, 2020 marked the 5th year that the ASE program is in the City of Regina. There are 3 cameras that move throughout various locations in the city. 2 are in select school zones and 1 on the Ring Road. In 2020, the automated speed enforcement tickets increased 21.4% from 2019. The red light camera is the other area I want to speak on. So in 2019, the red light camera was updated with the digital technology. The city had restarted the program at that point. The program operates at 3 intersections with 4 cameras. And in 2020, there were 1,072 red light tickets issued as compared to 1,502 tickets in 2019. Throughout 2020, the RPS has continued to focus on impaired driving, and the results for our efforts are as follows. 1,046 impaired driving calls for service were entered in 2020. 405 drivers were charged with impaired driving, 261 with exceed 08, 66 were charged with refusal, which is a total of 732 of the 1,046 calls, which resulted in charges. 314 of those calls were resolved without charges in the noted categories. They may be as a direct result of the vehicle or driver was gone before police attended, the plate number was not known or could not be obtained, or it was not an impaired driver, or there was a traffic safety infraction. I'd like to talk to you about the Combined Traffic Safety Services Unit. This was a partnership that was created in, this is the 3rd year of the partnership. Oh, sorry, I'm just getting a warning from my phone that I've used too much data. I should probably hurry up. This is the 3rd year, or 2020 was the third year of our partnership within CTSS. So we have a partnership with the Moose Jaw Police Service, Prince Albert Police Service, the RCMP, the Ministry of Justice, and Saskatchewan Government Insurance. So over 3 years, the Regina Police Service CTSS team has contributed significantly to the program's main objective to help reduce serious injury, fatal collisions in Saskatchewan by focusing on seatbelt use, impaired driving, distracted and aggressive driving. You will also see their statistics. They are operated with a sergeant, a corporal, and 8 constables. Their area of jurisdiction is the South District of the RCMP, which includes all points south of Davidson, Saskatchewan. And then lastly, but not save the best for last, the Crime Stoppers community programs. The Crime Stoppers is an effective way, as you know, for community to provide information to police that assist in solving crimes through recovering stolen property, seizing illegal drugs, and locating those with outstanding warrants for arrest. The Regina Crime Stoppers helps the Regina Police Service solve crime through anonymous tips provided by everyday people. Cash rewards are offered for information that solves or prevents crime. In 2020, the Regina Crime Stoppers coordinator worked with our partnership through the Regina Crime Stoppers board, CTV, for Crimes of the Week. So every Monday, we aired a reenactment of a crime to generate support and information from the community with respect to an event that had happened in our city. Initially in 2020, Regina Crime Stoppers had partnered with the Regina Police Service Cultural and Diversity Unit to deliver in-person presentations to the Open Door Society about personal safety, securing and protecting residences and personal property, how to report incidents to the police, etc. Due to the pandemic, however, the in-person presentations were ceased, and currently these presentations are being looked at on other meeting platforms to deliver this information. Leaders Creating Future Leaders, which is an incredible program developed by Regina Crime Stoppers, will commence once school is fully back in session. And the board is attempting to re-engage with our community through their online presence, interviewing, Facebook Live events. I believe Councillor Bresciani and others, the chief, have been on some of these events to talk about, raise awareness of public safety. To date, if I could, since Regina Crime Stoppers' inception in 1984, over $10 million in stolen property and drugs have been recovered with the help of Regina Crime Stoppers. So total property and drugs recovered is $11,290,814. Thank you. I'll take your questions.
Any members of the board wish to ask Inspector Young questions? I think they have empathy for your dying data.
Mayor Masters, I would like to ask a question if I can.
Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the great work that you guys do. I really appreciate it. On page 3 of the report, I do have a question. Out of the 4 zones in the southeast zone accounted for the highest numbers of the crimes at the 41.34%. Can you just elaborate on that? That was, and then also that was the against crimes against property, as well. And the other one was again crime against the person, and that was the highest again in the southeast, was 32%. Can you elaborate, or is this just on the north? Sorry, were you just talking? Yeah, okay, I'll leave it there. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor Masters, what I would suggest is, so we're going to do 3 district reports. This was just the North District, but because each district has specific areas, so for example, as Audra talked about, she handles the North District of the city, but she also handles traffic. It's probably prudent to stop and take questions in between if people have questions. But yeah, Councillor Bresciani, your question will be likely explained better in a moment when Jeff Wagner does his presentation on the South District, although I see Kelly Trithard is sitting in the chair. He's central, which is fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Bresciani will come back to that question if that's okay near the end.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
perfect. Good morning.
Okay, so I'll tell you, I was worried about the power bill. Now I'm worried about the data bills that we're paying for our inspectors' phones. But regardless, we're going to go now to the Central District. We've got Inspector Kelly Trithart joining us. Kelly is the inspector of the Central District. He authored this report, and we'll turn it over to Kelly to walk us through the report.
Thank you, Chief. And good morning, Mayor Masters and members of the board. It's my pleasure to speak with you this morning about a very busy area in Regina in regards to crimes against property, crimes against persons, as well as an amazing amount of community work and participation and involvement the Regina Police Service has in the Central District. So in the Central District, we have the North Central community, the Heritage community, and the downtown core. Each area gives us the opportunity to become involved in investigating crime, preventing crime, and participating in many programs and corresponding with agencies who provide support for those residents and businesses in each area. The Central District has 2 zones for our officers, including the North Central Zone and the South Central Zone. The zones are then divided, as we mentioned earlier, Inspector Young did, into areas or atoms. So the Community Service Division's Central District is currently managed by 1 inspector, myself, and 1 Staff Sergeant, Chris Jackie, who are responsible for the administration of Central District members within 6 patrol shifts. The inspector is also the officer that's in charge of our Community Engagement Unit, located at the Mamawayatin Center, and it provides oversight also to the Downtown Beat Patrol. So at Regina Police Service, all of our districts, we really work hard together to communicate and have a team-oriented approach to address the needs of the community. It doesn't really matter whether it's a crime or assistance of a person needing mental health support or something that becomes a community concern like our pandemic that we're going through. We really try to work together on the concern and come up with a solution. Certainly working together helps everyone reach a common goal to tackle an issue, and we try and do it that way. And Inspector Young also talked about our tactical analysts, and we're no different. When they collect and report the crime data for our district, the information is reported daily to the organization, and then it's used to identify those hot spots of crime within the city. So the Central District Staff Sergeant then can use that information to create the opportunity to develop responses and direct police resources to these areas. And we can do that in a lot of different ways, both reactively and proactively, to prevent more of these offenses occurring in the future. We'll ensure the investigation is continuing on for those that have already occurred, or we'll assign officers or units to do some more work on the incident and perhaps collect more evidence or interview or discover more witnesses. Excuse me. Finally, we'll proactively and strategically have officers attend to the area between calls for service, and they'll show presence and enforce things like the Traffic Safety Act for those infractions that they observe occurring or that are in progress. And along with this, we'll identify people who need to be located and make our members in the district aware of them and give information about them and where they can be found. Perhaps we'll locate them. So let's take a look at crimes against property in our Central District. In 2020, property crime in the Central District accounted for 24.9% of all reported property crime in the city of Regina. The North Central Zone reported the highest number of these violations, accounting for 58.77% of all property violations in the Central District. But if we look at property crime, it has decreased since 2019 in the Central District. And the total property violations in the Central District have decreased by 29.28%. If we look at our crimes against persons in the Central District in 2020, it accounted for 39.5% of all reported crimes against the person in the city of Regina. Of the two zones within the Central District and North Central Zone, reported the highest number of violations, accounting for 62.53% of all reported crimes against a person within the Central District. So our North Central Zone is the busiest. If we talk about our responsibility, I alluded to the fact that the community engagement unit's also involved. And in 2020, the Community Engagement Unit continued operations from its home office at the Mama-Wahyeton Center. And the unit is comprised of 5 constables, a corporal, and a sergeant. These officers, they play a really important role in the Central District. They participate in a number of community outreach programs, and they collaborate with community stakeholders to respond and resolve community concerns. The members, they walk the beat, they go on the bicycle, as well as they're available at the community office there to allow the public to report incidents to police without having to travel outside of the North Central community. Although we were faced with a lot of challenges for COVID and everything it had to offer, these officers worked with many community partners, and they attended community businesses and agencies, including places like the Warming Center in the North Central area. And they continued to participate as much as possible with programs like Cops and Readers, and they sat on many committees like HUB. There's 2 Central District beat officers on each of the 4 patrol shifts. So we got 8 officers that are on the beat. The Central District beat officers continue to work closely with a number of downtown partners, including the Regina Downtown Business Improvement District, Cornwall Center, and the Regina Public Library. And they discuss a lot of different issues and events and deal with those. Certainly, we're committed to our mission as Regina Police Service and the Central District, and our vision of working together with our respective community members and businesses remains vital in order for us to assist those victimized by crime in our district. So as we move forward in 2021, all of those members in the Central area will continue to provide respectful professional service. And I personally, along with all of you, look forward to the time when we can communicate with each other in person and continue to strive to be progressive and improve as a police service. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Inspector Tredart. Chief, did you want to add anything? You're good? Are there any questions specific to the Central Zone? Councillor Bresciani?
Thank you very much. Through you, Mayor Masters. Thank you for the work that you do in the Central area. I want to someone had asked me in regards to the Mama-Wahyeton there and the staff there. The question was, what are the hours for those officers? Because they felt that they were asking why they do not work at night. So is there, and I wasn't sure. So what are the hours, and is there a service so if something was happening, they could connect back to the Mama-Wahyeton in the evening? Or is that office open at night, or what are the hours through there? Through you, Madam Mayor.
Yes, so they work day shifts, so 8 to 4. But there's many times where they will change their shifts and work evenings. I know every Tuesday the center there delivers meals to the people in the community, and many times our CEU officers will change their shift to nights to help with things like that and other community events. There's a lot of times where there's community activities that happen in the evening, so they'll change their shifts. They receive reports from the community though during the day shift. There's lots of times where they'll switch things around so that they can work evenings. But the office would be closed after their day shift is over at 4 p.m. Okay.
And can I just ask, do you think is there a need to, have you heard anything from the community that that they would like the office to be open through the night? Through the
Well, I think that's a great point and something to consider in the future. I know 2020 doesn't give us a great indication of the reports that they take at the center there. They were really down a lot during the pandemic for 2020. And hopefully this year we'll get a better indication of how many reports and how many people are attending there, and whether there's a need for people to want to come in the evening, and perhaps we would look at that and make a change.
Chief,
Thank you.
Councillor Bresciani, can I have Chief Bray also respond to your question?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so, I think the first thing I would say is that the people that work out of Mamaweatatin Center are our community engagement unit and our cultural unit. So their mandate is not to be a 24/7 emergency service. Although they will take a report, if someone comes in and wants to report graffiti to a garage or an issue, they will take the report. They are police officers and they can jump into action if we need them to. But their primary focus really is about community engagement, both the cultural and the community engagement unit. We had service centers for many years. We had one in the Al Ritchie area and we had one in the Albert Scott area. And we went away from those because we had officers sitting at a desk for hours with no one coming in, and we needed those officers out on the street. Officers on the street are at a premium, and so if someone in North Central needs help, they can get a hold of the police, and we've got officers deployed in that area, and they can get help instantly without having to physically go to Mamaweatatin. So it's not to say that we haven't thought of that. Obviously, we did that for many years. We closed the Al Ritchie satellite station first, just because there was really not many people coming through the doors. Most people that need an emergency police response will call 911, and if they need information or if they've got an investigation or a concern, they will call in more on the admin line to get that. So the need and the call for having that center staffed 24/7 is quite great to the police service, and really the need after hours is, I'm not going to say there is no need, but it's fairly small compared to the benefit we get from having those officers deployed out on the street and working, actually responding to calls for service.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. How many members are on are in the central district? Through the chair.
You mean as far as patrol in general? I think there's around 80 officers.
Sorry, how many?
80?
80 that are dedicated for the central district then?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boucher, you have some questions?
I do, but Councillor Laurie actually asked the question that I wanted to ask. So I just wanted to clarify the 80 number the 80 people you said are stationed in the central district. Is that included in are they included in the 5 constables, the 1 corporal, and sergeant, or do the numbers that I just called, do they just only work in the Mamaweatatin Center?
No, I might be off. The chief might be able to correct me on the number, but we have 6 different shifts, and we have around 6 to 10 different officers at any one time that'll be in that area. So and added in with the community engagement unit, that it would be around that number.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of the size of the district that you're covering, central, in terms of the landmass, it seems to be smaller than the north or the south. So am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, but and if I look at the rates and the stats, the numbers in terms of the crime are would you say that the type of crimes are somewhat significantly higher or more intense, or how will I put it, as compared to other districts, or what would you, how would you describe your, okay, good. So then my question then is, the other sergeant, the lady that did the presentation for the North District, she had reported 1 sergeant, 2 corporals, and 11 constables. And I'm wondering which is in total 11, 12, 13, 14 people, right? Sergeants, corporals, constables, right, working. But the Central only has 7. So again, can you explain what's going on there? Like, or is it 80 or is it 7? I'm sort of confused.
Thanks, Commissioner Bushey. Inspector Trittart, if it's okay, I'll have Chief Bray address the question.
Okay.
Okay, so there's lots of different moving parts here, and I think the numbers that you were referring to, Commissioner Bushey, with regard to the north were traffic. They were predominantly and focused only on traffic safety. So in terms of patrol response, we have patrol officers deployed so that each shift, so today we've got a day shift working. We have a sergeant, a corporal, and a number of constables working in the north, working in the central, and working in the south. And those numbers predominantly are consistently around the same per district. So the North District would have, on any given day or night, 1 sergeant, 1 corporal, and I would say 13, 14 constables that make up that shift. So that would be the same for North, same for Central, and the same for South. But added on to that, we also have 2 other patrol shifts that are really almost what we would call swing shifts. So they overlap during peak times, and they predominantly also work in the Central District, and there are 10 officers on those shifts. So, I would say that we have a larger number of resources dedicated to the Central District than with regard to the North and the South, and that really is in response to being able to handle the volume of calls and work that comes out of that district. Although geographically it is a bit smaller, we do see, if you're looking at crimes against the person, for example, a larger portion of those happen in that small area, and so we want to make sure that we're staffed in a way that we're responsive to it. So when you're talking about things like the traffic safety unit, the community engagement unit, our PAC team, which you're going to hear about in the next presentation, those are supplementary to patrol, but those aren't the ones out responding to the 911 calls. So we do have what I consider to be a very good and equal representation throughout the city, built proportionately so that we have officers assigned in a way that we can handle the call volumes as they happen.
I appreciate that explanation, Chief, and I think Lorley actually just sent a message on the chat, which actually makes a lot of sense to me. So thank you, and thank you so much. I don't want to, Sergeant, are you a sergeant? Sergeant Kelly, for the work that you do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Bushey. Any other questions for Inspector Trittart? Hearing none, I'll thank you very much, Inspector, and I think we'll move on to Southeast.
South District, that's right. Thank you, Mayor Masters. So the South District report will be presented by Inspector Jeff Wagner, who authored this report. I'll turn it over to Jeff. You're up, Jeff.
You're on mute, Inspector Wagner.
Rookie mistake, sorry.
Chief may like that, but we'd like to hear you.
Okay, I'll start over. Good morning, Mayor Masters, members of the board, and Councillor Stevens and Councillor Bresciani. I'm going to give you an executive summary regarding the 2020 South District year-end report. The South District, it encompasses the area of Victoria Avenue, east of Winnipeg Street, west of Albert Street, to the city limits. And the South District, it's broken down into 4 main zones, those being south, southeast, southwest, and the east. The South District is overseen by 1 inspector, myself, and a staff sergeant, Cam Kuffner. And we're responsible for basically the oversight of the South District members and the 4 patrol shifts, which the chief just outlined. Also under the South District, we have the School Resource Program and the Regina Intersectoral Partnership, also known as TRIP, and Regina Hub, and also our police and crisis team, also referred to as PACT. So, as mentioned by Inspector Young and Inspector Trithart, Regina Police Service, we have a team of tactical analysts who report on basic on crime trends, and they collect data. This information is reported daily and is used to help us identify hotspots that are happening in the city for crime trends. The information we find, I deem it as critical, and it provides our district staff sergeants who are tasked with monitoring those crime trends an opportunity to effectively direct resources and develop timely strategies to deal with those hotspots. The Regina Police Service, we also produce a community crime report through our records management system. This report, it allows us to compare reported crimes against person and crimes against property for the South District, and then it also allows us to compare the South District reported crimes to the remainder of the city, just to kind of see where we stand. Regarding property crime in the South District in 2020, it accounted for 41.3% of reported property crime in the city of Regina. This was down very slightly from 2019 at 0.02%. Of the 4 zones in the South District, the Southeast zone accounted for the highest number of events at 41.34% of all property crimes in the South District. And then the Southwest zone had the fewest number of reported crimes, property crimes in the district at 14.25. When we do a 3-year comparison and compare break and enters, theft from auto, theft of auto, and mischiefs for 2020, the South District experienced decreases in all those areas as compared to 2019. Regarding crimes for against person, crimes against person in the South District in 2020, it accounted for 31% of the reported crimes against persons in the city of Regina. And this was up very slightly, 1.58% from 2019. And then of the 4 zones in the South District, the Southeast zone accounted for the highest number of events at 32% of all crimes against person in the district. And the East zone had the fewest number of reported crimes against persons in the district at 18.3%. And then overall, the South District, we saw a 4% increase in assault offenses and a 4.6% decrease in robbery offenses in 2020 as compared to 2019. When we compare all crime which occurred in Regina, 32.3% of all crime reported in Regina occurred in the South District. And this is consistent with numbers that we saw in 2019. So, as mentioned, the South District, the School Resource Officer Program, and the Regina Intersectoral Partnership, I'll refer to it as TRIP, and Regina Hub, and the PAC team, they all fall underneath the South District umbrella. I'm going to just give you a quick overview of each of those programs. So regarding the School Resource Officer Program, there's 14 School Resource Officers in the section. It consists of 1 sergeant who supervises the section and 13 constables and 1 corporal. The School Resource Officers, they look after 14 high schools, 81 elementary schools, and approximately 10 alternate schools and programs. One of the 14 officers is dedicated to teaching full-time law, public safety and security class at the campus Regina Public, and another officer is dedicated to teaching about 75% at the Scott Police Academy. Because of COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, as you guys all know, the academic year was reduced for the schools. School year was concluded in March of 2020, and because of that, our school resource officers, they were redeployed to patrol from March 20 to August 20. And so in consideration of the time we have here today, and I'll say the anticipated interest that the board may have in the regarding the SRO program, we've scheduled a separate, a more detailed presentation from the SROs that's going to be happening in August. Moving on to the TRIP program, the Regina Intersectoral Partnership, otherwise known again as TRIP, falls under the South District, as I mentioned. TRIP is a multi-sector collaborative risk-driven initiative designed to improve community safety and the well-being in Regina. TRIP program is made up of the 11 and under initiative and then a 12 and up initiative. TRIP is a shared commitment by multiple human service agencies, and they include the Ministry of Social Services, the Ministry of Justice, Ministry of the Saskatchewan Health Authority, the Regina Public and Catholic School Boards, and the Regina Police Service. TRIP works out of the Regina Public School Office, and stakeholders, they provide both financial and in-kind staff resources. The Regina Police Service, we have one full-time corporal assigned to TRIP. TRIP, again, it aims to generate risk reduction and ultimately reduce the vulnerability of children and their families through. We try to improve the communication and come up with a collaborative approach by all the service providers to come up with some solutions. Again, because of COVID-19, the TRIP program was suspended from March 20th to August 20th. And as a result, during that time, we redeployed the corporal assigned to TRIP back to Community Services Division. And again, in consideration of, I'll say, the anticipated interest and questions the board may have, we've again scheduled a separate TRIP presentation for the board, and that's going to be happening in July. And then going on to the PAC team and also Regina Hub. The Regina Police and Crisis Team, again, otherwise known as PACT and Hub, they also fall underneath the South District. PACT is comprised of 2 mental health clinicians from the Saskatchewan Health Authority, and then 2 police officers, constables, and then 1 sergeant. Our PACT unit is staffed 7 days a week from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. PACT, they strive to improve the police crisis team response to vulnerable people experiencing mental illness and or addiction concerns. PACT has created and they maintain a network between RPS and the Saskatchewan Health Authority. We find that this network but also includes a number of community partners to help maintain an environment of trust and support to produce better outcomes for hopefully people in crisis. Regarding Regina Hub, in 2018, the Regina Hub was formally established. The Regina Hub is a partnership between the Regina Police Service, Saskatchewan Health Authority, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Corrections and Policing, Ministry of Social Services, and Regina Housing Authority. The Regina Police Service PAC Sergeant has a position within the Hub Committee and plays an active role in trying to identify those individuals in our community who present, acutely elevated level of risk. And basically, they look at 5 different categories: mental health, alcohol, criminal involvement, parenting, and antisocial and negative behavior. The Regina Police Service, again, we've been involved with Hub since the inception in the city of Regina, and we'll continue to support the personnel and provide personnel and support. And again, it's the goal of Hub to provide basically try to do an integrated and focused approach, which we think can effectively identify and connect and provide long-term solutions for those people who present a elevated risk in our community. Again, in the interest of time, the Hub, PACT and Hub has been scheduled to present at the board in May. And so with that, I'll conclude. Any questions?
Thank you, Inspector Wagner. Any questions from the board? Councillor Stevens?
Great, thank you. I understand that there will be an SRO presentation later this summer, but I do have a question about one of the definitions here, the violent threat risk assessments. Could you comment on what qualifies as a VTRA, specifically a stage 1 VTRA, which is listed in the report, please?
You know what? I will. I've brought the sergeant that looks after the school resource program, and he'll be better able to answer that question, I think. So I'll turn it over to Sergeant Korchinski here. Yeah, no, it's locked over. So.
Hi there. Sorry, we're just doing some chair shuffling here. Like Inspector Wagner said, my name is Sergeant Jared Korchinski. I'm in charge of the school resource program here at the Regina Police Service. If I heard your question correctly, you had a question about the VTRA, or the Violent Threat Risk Assessment. So a level 1 violent threat risk assessment. It can be anything from disturbing behavior brought forward by a student. It could be a student that perhaps brings a weapon to school. It could be someone who makes a threat towards another student. And it can happen both either at school or at home involving students. Sometimes these issues are brought forward by the school. Sometimes they're brought forward by social services. Sometimes they're brought forward by a community program. And because all of these different organizations are all part of the VITRA threat assessment team, either or any of those organizations can start a VITRA level 1. So I'm not sure if that answers your question or not.
That helps. Thank you.
Yeah.
My last question about the SRO is I understand that the Public School Board is undergoing its own review of the program. Is the RPS involved in that discussion, or is it being handled by a third party?
Sergeant, I'll have Chief Bray answer the question.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Stevens. So yes, I actually was, so Superintendent Laura Lee Davies and I presented to the Public School Board on the School Resource Officer program. Sergeant Korchinski was involved in that presentation, developing that presentation as well. And it was at that meeting where there was some discussion around obviously what's happening across Canada and in the United States in terms of examination of the SRO program and understanding the value that they provide, and also understanding if there's any opportunities for adjustments or things that would enhance or improve the program. And so it was from that board meeting that they decided they were going to do some work, some outreach. We have basically signaled right from the start that we're happy to participate and help in any way. I just had a conversation with Greg Enyon, the director for the Public School Board, just this past weekend about that as well, just clarifying that we are happy to be involved in whatever capacity. Some of it, of course, will be to lend understanding and some data to the work that we do as they're doing outreach in the community to dig into this. So the short answer is yes, we're involved, but we're not leading it. Obviously, the school board is leading it, and I don't know if they've made a determination if they're going to actually hire an outside body to do that work or if they're going to undertake it themselves.
Thank you very much. That's all I had.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Bresciani.
Thank you very much. So, first of all, I want to say thank you to Inspector Jeff Wagner. He is our guy out here, so I want to say thank you for the work that you guys do here in the South. I just have a question in regard. You did talk about the stats, and the highest is the Southeast out of all the South Zone. And it's about 41.34% in the crimes area, crimes against property, crimes against the person, it's 32%. Can you just elaborate for me what you're finding there, why that would be the highest, or what, just a little bit of a info what you got there, why it is? To the chair.
Yeah, I don't have a specific answer to why that area is the highest. It could be population in just the area and crimes of opportunity. But again, back to when we're doing our analysis, we definitely know that when there are hotspots, and we direct resources to try and deal with those crime trends that are happening in the area. But it's just disposition of crime throughout the city of Regina. Some areas are higher and some are lower, and we do try and keep track of what is going on and keep our finger on it, so to speak, daily. So,
Councillor Bresciani, if I can jump in, I think Inspector Wagner's right. A lot of it has to do with population density. It's got to do with retail businesses. So, for example, if property crime shows high in an area, oftentimes shoplifting charges will be high. And so if you look at that southeast part of our city, there is a huge retail area out there. So no different when we look in the North District, you see things look a lot different in the Northwest as compared to the Northeast, because Northeast is predominantly industrial area, whereas Northwest has more retail population, those types of things. So it's really kind of the geography of the area and what is contained in that area. Schools, community of centers, those types of things can often play throughout the city in terms of having an effect on crime trends.
Okay, great. When on page 7 we compare the South District comparison to all the zones, when we look at the highest, which was the Central District, which is the 14,959, and then the South was 13,000, there was a difference about 1,800. That's kind of the gap that's ever been the smallest compared to when you go back to the previous years. I guess the question I'm asking is there any concern with it growing in that regard at all, or is it, I mean, and I understand that it's come down in this year, and maybe it's because we are in a pandemic, but is there any red flags that come when we look at the overall stats comparison to all zones, I guess, through the chair?
So can I answer that question, Inspector Wagner, and feel free to supplement this, but we've had this discussion in various forms. The reality is there's a lot of growth happening in the South. If you look at Harbor Landing, if you look at the southeast part of our city and the growth that has happened in that area, it's got a lot to do with kind of my first point. The population density in that area is significantly more. So as you add more people, sadly, there's challenges that can happen that correspond to that with regard to crime. So I think it really speaks to the closing of the gap that you're identifying there, knowing that sometimes it's a trend that may change next year, but I do think that there's a lot of it is involved with just the significant growth that we've seen. If you look at Harbor Landing alone, that area, 7 years ago compared to where we are now is night and day, and so you see those increases in those areas based on that growth.
Thank you. I would agree. So on the map that is provided, it's just the area that's shaded, but there's nothing in there with population for those areas. Is that accurate?
Yeah, you're right. We don't have them broken down by population. However, I can tell you that when we do district and zone reviews, we're set up the way that we are so that we can maximize resources based on overall percentages. So if you look at, the percentage of crime that happens in the South District versus the rest of the city, we want to make sure that we have the proportionate amount of resources allocated to that area to handle that. And so you may see within a district, if the South District has a lot of people living in a couple of areas, the North is an easy one to use as an example. We don't have as many officers assigned to the West Zone in the North as we do to the Northwest because of the population and the number of people. So we do try and distribute officers. We break up the city by districts to try and have an even distribution, but within those districts we have different representations of how many officers are assigned based on the number of people that live in the area, the number of businesses in the area, and really what our experience has been in terms of how many calls we get.
Yeah, I thank you for that. I guess I would ask that if there is an opportunity, and if it's not too much, I think it would be very, very helpful for us, because we've heard that the amount, like, resources are dedicated. Councillor or Commissioner Bushi asked when you're looking at the certain numbers of officers in areas, but I think the amount of population in the different zones would be helpful, because I think that we would be very surprised when we actually look at the South. It is immensely dense, and if that can be a takeaway, I would appreciate that as well, because that's where the two highest growth areas of the city have been since at least 2012, and so that's just one point. I want to say thank you for the TRIP and the PACT and those programs. I've heard from teachers and staff that they are so grateful to have those. It's unfortunate, and I know there is a long wait for those as well. But I want to ask just about the Regina Hub, and where are we with that? I see that it said that due to COVID, it has been you haven't met, but is that a place that we're going to see some decisions made about what are needed for resources from the provincial government to work with us as a city as we move forward, if it's through addictions or mental health, and just the criminal involvement overall? Through the chair.
The chief might be able to comment more on I guess, specific funding coming from government, but yeah, Hub is back up and running. It came back online in September, and yeah, they did notice an increase in referrals as a result of being down for that period of time during COVID. But yeah, I agree. It's a great partnership and trying to proactively deal with people in crisis. So. But it takes all our partners working together to come to those solutions. So,
I'll jump in with just a comment, Councillor, on a couple of your points here. So with regard to Hub, I think it's a really good example of how we can sit at a table and literally look our partners in the face and hold one another accountable. Because we're at the table, we're dealing with acute and elevated risk in an individual or a family. And if it is clearly not something that the police can handle or are best equipped to handle, we can look across the table at addictions, or we can look across the table at social services, or whichever partner it might be, and say, okay, well, who would be best set up to handle this situation? Sometimes it's multiple partners that have to work together, but when you're actually physically sitting in a room, adjudicating and making decisions about what's best for the family and who's best to help them, it makes it really easy for us to say, this is yours. This isn't something that we can do, this is yours. The problem with the Hub table is it handles the tip of the iceberg. It handles highly elevated acute risk and doesn't even come close to scratching the bigger problem in the city. It really is about those high risk referrals that come forward. And sometimes, you know, someone will notice a child absent for many days at school or a child lethargic and sleeping in school because they're not sleeping at night. It makes its way to the Hub table, and there's a bigger problem in the family. And so some incredible work is being done there, but it's like anything, we are just literally scraping the surface in terms of what needs to be done. If there was a way we could stand up a big Hub table for the whole province, if we could throw everybody in one pot and we could reimagine the way we're going to handle social challenges, that's essentially what the Hub table is doing on an individual basis every week. So I do think it is a great way for us to hold our partners accountable in areas where they can make a better difference than we can. The problem is it's in, you know, a small number of cases compared to the volume that we handle every year. And I'm just going to go back. So we can include population as part of that. Superintendent Laura-Lee Davies and her team right now are actually undergoing a zone boundary project where they're re-examining zone boundaries to make sure that they're appropriate in terms of their allocation. The one thing I will caution and just say, it's more of a statement than anything, is we don't necessarily staff policing wise just the population. Because if that was the case, we likely would have a very small number of police officers in the central district due to the smaller population. Yet we know that our experience is we have a lot of calls for service in certain categories in some of those areas. And so we take population into consideration, but it's not the number one factor. There's a lot of other things which I think as importantly includes what has our experience been, what are the calls for service, what's the demand that's coming for that area, and how can we make sure we're resourced and our boundaries are drawn in a way that we can match the demand.
Yeah, absolutely agree, and it's in balance, so thank you for that. I agree. And then just the last question, I guess, is, again, just in regards to the trends for Inspector Jeff Wagner, I just want to say thank you. I know there was stunting and racing, and that, I'm not sure what you call that group that you come together and you start looking at saying where the call's coming from. I just want to tell you that has been hugely a success for even residents that have commented back to, I think, Regina Police, but also to us or to myself, that looking at and trying to hone down on that, and the project speed. I just want to know, when does that, has it already started, and when does that end? Through the chair.
You're still on mute, Jeff.
I could talk to you a little bit more offline about it, Councillor Bresciani, if you want. But as you know, we've focused some attention in that area from conversations that we had, and yeah, maybe offline might be a better venue for it.
Just again, I just want to say thank you for the intense work that has been done in the community across Regina, but also in the area here. So thank you. That's all I have.
I'll just add to that, Councillor Bresciani, that Project Speed has started. So we've done some social media on it. And Inspector Audrey Young, through her work in charge of the traffic safety unit, is really the lead on that. But it has definitely started and will be going now through to summer.
Thank you, Councillor
Great,
Bresciani.
thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bushi?
Thank you, Mayor Masters. So I just have two questions. And first of all, I just want to apologize. I've used the different titles to call people. I think I called someone a sergeant when they're inspector. So please forgive my naivety here. So Inspector Wagner, I just have a question regarding the I'm not sure if it will fall under the SRO or the VTRA program. How do you handle online bullying experienced by students? Where does the SRO officer or one of your programs come into place, or do you handle those threats and complaints from outside the schools, specifically online? And you're on mute, by the way, if you're trying to talk.
I'll turn it over again to Sergeant Korchinski, but yeah, they definitely handle the online bullying within the schools. I'll turn it over to Sergeant Korchinski. Okay, so the online bullying part. The first part of that would be an education piece that the SROs do within the school. So SROs often throughout the school year will provide presentations to all ages of students in regards to online bullying in hopes of educating them on the consequences, the dangers, things like that. If an online bullying incident, a specific incident were to happen outside of school hours, yes, absolutely, that would be assigned to a school resource officer. Typically, both the victim or the offender would be part of the same school. So a lot of times that would fall under the same umbrella, or the same SRO would deal with that. A lot of times, because of the proactive nature of this school resource program, a lot of times these are already on the radar of the school resource officer. They didn't just start off as an online bullying. There was an incident that happened, something happened within school, and maybe they already know of some incidents where they've already dealt with some of these students. So typically it's not a surprise, and it ends up being dealt with, whether it be criminally, whether it be through mediation, whether it be through parents and having them come in, and between the administration of the school and the SRO and the child and the parent, they sit down and discuss, different alternatives in hopes of rectifying that situation.
Thank you. So my question then can you help me answer a question? It's under the TREAP program. I just want some clarification. It says, by focusing on coordinated services, supports, and a reduction of barriers to pro-social activities. What do you mean by pro-social activities?
I will turn you over to Corporal Shatta. He's in charge of the TRIP program, and he'd probably better be able to answer that for you.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Good afternoon. Can you repeat the question?
So, well, under the TREAP program, it talks about, I guess, mitigating barriers to pro-social activities. What do you mean by pro-social activities?
So basically what that means is that we help young people get in touch with community activities that they might otherwise not be able to get involved in. So that could be like recreational activities. We try and help break down the barriers and provide funding, transportation to help supply them with activities.
Okay, you mean maybe sports in some cases?
Yes, sports or
Oh.
arts, music. Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so a child doesn't necessarily have to maybe be experiencing some form of maybe aggressive behavior or threats or something for them to be able to join the TREAP program. Anybody can join the TREAP program, or is it specific to certain group of people or kids with maybe behavioral issues? How does that work?
Basically, the referrals come in that kids that are at risk of becoming victimization of criminal activity or becoming involved in criminal activity. Most of our referrals come through the schools, through patrol officers, through guidance counselors, social services, but it's not based on socioeconomic class or anything like that. It's based on kids who have been identified as showing some behaviors that are at risk of becoming vulnerable to basically crime or violence or those sorts of things. So when they get referred to us, we do a risk assessment. We identify what those risks are, and then we try and plug in the services that are going to address those issues to help stabilize that young person and their family.
Okay. And so in terms of diversity and the demographics of students who are involved in TREAP, say TREAP, HUB, and the PACT, what's the demographic? How do you work with community members or community organizations to maybe I guess you can. Sorry, I think you just answered the question, because I'm thinking you only get referrals from all those organizations, say teacher, principals, and so on, right? To see maybe a child would need help in those programs before they can join. Or the question I'm asking is, in terms of diversity, what kind of demographics, right, do you see? Like typically, would you say for example, the PACT program? I know there was 374 people that were referred to community mental health services and so on. You have the list here, but I just wanted to know who are these people? Like who are the kids or the students that actually participate in these programs? Are they usually from mainstream? Are they typically from a particular school? Or is it something you may need to describe outside of this meeting?
I can only comment on the TRIP program. I've only been in the program for the last 3 months. What I can tell you is that it's a wide variety of diversity. It's coming from all parts of the city, suburbs, inner city, all different types of community-based as far as the different nationalities and that sort of thing. It's very widespread.
Okay, thank you.
One thing that maybe I'll just add while we're talking about the TRIP program is that the work with families is an important part of it, and I know Derek touched on that, but we want and require family consent and desire to work together and collaboratively. So it really is about identifying youth who might be 10 years old, and we don't want them to fall into the criminal justice system, which can happen when they turn 12. So how can we prevent this from happening? And so many times, and Derek will be in a better position to talk to this, but the families are extremely appreciative and welcoming of the work that the team does. And it's not just our police service, it's multiple partners to try and help that student get into a good place where they're not going off on that bad path. And sometimes, as we dig deeper into it, we find that it's challenges in the home. So it might be a problem with a big brother or a sibling, a situation where they don't have good supervision. And oftentimes the family is very needy and welcoming of this help to try and get things back on track, because turmoil, if it's in a classroom and a teacher identifies it, it likely is turmoil in the home too, outside of school hours. And so that's an essential part of our TRIP program, is working collaboratively with families, and that family consent is an essential element. Derek, do you have anything to add to that?
No, just as you were saying, yes, everything's based on consent based. So it's a matter of the referrals are made with the family's consent or the guardian's consent. And once the young person is accepted into the program, it's more they'll be assigned a caseworker that's generally a social worker from one of the school divisions. And what they help the family do is they'll meet with the parents and the young person, and they'll come up with a game plan involving the parent as part of that process. And major focuses are on school attendance and breaking down barriers and linking people into services that they might not otherwise know that exist out there. So that's basically the main part of the program, is getting the family and the young people identify what their risks are, finding out what the services are, and matching those up, and hopefully stabilizing that family as fast as you can so that young person isn't at risk, like the chief said, at becoming involved in criminal activity or becoming the victim of criminal activity and that sort of thing.
Thank you so much for that explanation. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And good luck and with all you do and your team as well. So well done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your help. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other members of the board wish to ask a question? Cam, Councillor Bresciani, I just wanted to bring something to your attention because I think you were highlighting it in terms of crime. When you do the numbers in terms of change, the Northwest has gone down 16% 2019 to 2020. The South has gone down 16.6% in terms of overall occurrences, and Central has gone down 14.8%. So it would appear that the Central District has the highest number as well as the least amount of reduction in terms of incidents, although overall reduction is always welcome. I have a question about the School Resource Officer program. Do you currently, or is there talks in terms of educating youth about interpersonal violence?
I'll turn that over to
Yeah,
Jared.
maybe we'll let Sergeant Korchinski answer that. They do, a big part of their job is about positive messaging and presentations, and so Sergeant Korchinski can speak to interpersonal violence and what that looks like in terms of presentations. Jared?
Yes, absolutely. So within the school resource section, we have several different presentations that we give, and we find that we're constantly having to update these presentations as things change. For example, the drug presentation, things will change, with drugs and concerns and what they look like and how they're delivered, things like that. So we're constantly having to change those programs. So we don't have one directly related to interpersonal violence, but it is certainly something that can be done, and as the need for it arises, would be a welcome addition to any presentations that we currently do.
I will say that, I think respectful behavior, those types of presentations are things that our SROs will work on at all levels, but I know I've been present for them in elementary schools, talking about how we respect one another, how we understand boundaries, understand what respectful relationships look like, those types of things. So it may not be specifically targeting violence, but it does talk about, kind of what a respectful and acceptable behavior and relationship would look like.
Thanks for that. I think going forward, given the domestic assault calls that you take, as well as holding a ranking in Canada for domestic assault incidences on a go-forward basis, I'm wondering if it's on your radar, that's great, but in terms of educating youth, specifically as they reach a certain age in terms of what's acceptable between romantic partners and what's not, if there's value in that, I'll leave it with you. Again, I know it's on your radar, but it's going to have to start when they're young, because clearly we have an issue here in our city. as I know you're more aware than anyone. I do have a question for, I believe it's Inspector Young. And if I'm catching this correctly, in terms of the division of the areas of the city, you've attributed you've centralized the different kind of programming and units that you've got. I think it's brilliant. I would actually like to understand a little bit about the significance or importance of the traffic safety unit relative to supporting kind of overall patrol.
Sure. So maybe while we get, there's Inspector Young, and I'll turn it over to her, and Deputy Chief Ray may have some comments to add to that as well. Did you hear the question, Audra?
I did. So the traffic safety unit is comprised of those members that their primary focus is traffic safety on the roadway. What we do as an area is we take in a number of pieces of information, be they come from public complaints, information we receive from our members from the front line, and a number of ways where we respond to complaints. We also work in conjunction with the CTSS team from Regina Police Service. And so part of their role is to perform function within the city. 30 to 40% of their time is delegated to within the city of Regina, and then the remainder is outside. So we strategically focus our efforts with respect to those responses. We also operate in a manner that supports our tactical coordination, which we've reflected back to the crime stats that our analysts have collected. And so we respond in ways to crimes that's been reported by the previous week in order to sort of curb or have an impact on those instances that have occurred. So for example, in the Ross Industrial area, if we've had compound break-and enters, we advise our members about a focused approach there, that area is having some concerns around perhaps break-and enters to compounds or businesses or residents or wherever that is happening throughout the city. And our traffic safety unit responds by having a presence in the area. They do traffic stops. It is anecdotally our understanding that when a police officer does the traffic stop, that area remains or has the perception of safety for at least 1 to 2 hours. As well as we're finding through traffic stops and our traffic stop strategy that we're recovering more items that are inside vehicles. Those vehicles are being used for transportation for other criminal offenses. And we're having some great success through traffic safety and our frontline patrol. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
You did. Thank you very much. Chief? Deputy Chief?
Sure. The only thing I'll add is oftentimes our traffic units are moving around the city, and if we have a 911 call or an urgent call, our traffic units will support the work that patrol does as well. So if they're free to attend, they will definitely attend. Oftentimes they'll be dispatched to assist and support the frontline patrol guys until the adequate resources can be there as well.
Thank you very much. Chief, do you want to close off the report? You're good.
I think that's it. I started by saying we're going to give you a lot of information today, and there is a lot of information contained in there. We really encourage you, if you have any follow-up questions or things that you would like to see in the report going forward. This is an annual report we give, so Councillor Bresciani's request of adding some breakdown on population is something that we can work on going forward as well. But if there's anything else you'd like to see, please let us know. It's our annual opportunity to give you a bit of a breakdown in the city and introduce you to some of the great people that do the work day to day as well. So thanks very much for the opportunity on that.
And I'll thank you on behalf of the board for all of the inspectors and sergeants that presented today. Thanks very much for being present to answer questions and for the presentations themselves. There's really good information in there. Thank you. Do I have a motion to receive and file the report?
So moved, Bresciani.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. I'll call the question. Anyone opposed? We'll see that carried. We'll now consider PO 21-16, monthly crime statistics for March 2021. Chief?
Thank you, Mayor Masters. So this, we continue to move our way through the year and get a sense as to what the year is shaping up like in terms of comparison crime stats from the last year to this year. It's interesting actually where we're at right now, because this report that we're giving you today is up to and including the end of March. Last year in March was when we saw the transition from normal living into COVID living. And so the stats will be quite interesting as we go forward through the year to see how they compare to what we saw last year. Overall, our crimes against the property reflect a decrease of 28.1%, and we've seen a decrease in every area with the exception of theft of autos. Right now, we have a 4.8% increase. That's an 11 incident increase in the number of theft of autos this year compared to this time last year. You know, that's a small fluctuation, and we'll continue to monitor that as we go forward. In crimes against the person, overall a year-to-date decrease of 18.8%, which includes a significant decrease in robberies. We're down 42.9% there. So overall, when you put crimes against person and crimes against property together, we currently are at a 26.1% decrease over where we were at this time last year. If you go to the back of the report where we've got those templates, a couple of things that I will mention. The communication center statistics, we have seen a bit of a decrease year to date in the number of calls that we received, but we do expect to see as the year moves along, you'll notice our calls do increase as the weather gets nicer. Weather can have a big effect on the number of calls we attend and the types of calls that we attend. And so we expect as we get into the warmer weather, we will see those numbers start to increase. Our drug overdose dashboard is there. This continues to be a challenge that we are seeing daily in our city, and I've talked a bit about the work that is being done, aggressive work both from a long-term strategy and immediate harm reduction in our city to try and get a handle on this. The monthly dashboard, which gives you the breakdown. I will note, for example, on missing persons, you see that for the month of March, missing person reports were 151, whereas the missing people were 116. That's because we have multiple people that go missing more than once. And so we may have more reports, but it's the number of people that shows the difference there. But these other pressures continue: domestics, suicides, firearms, drugs, these types of pressures that we measure continue as well. We've seen a bit of a decrease in the number of COVID calls that we've been receiving, and the number of tickets that have been written. Obviously, we do know that we are still seeing rallies happening in the city. We saw a rally this past weekend, and our police service was on scene for that, and we did some enforcement in a couple of different instances, multiple instances there. And then at the back is just the daily breakdown of the daily dashboard with regard to, again, some of these kind of higher profile areas where we track domestic conflict, missing people, drug seizures, and those types of things. So I'll leave my report there. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any member of the board wish to ask Chief a question? Councillor Stevens?
Yeah, thank you. I very much appreciate the dashboard. I have a question about the March 21st, January to March 21st dashboard, specifically COVID calls by month. I guess my question is about the interpretation of some of these calls. So if a small business owner calls and says they're being threatened by someone because they've told them to wear a mask, is that a COVID call, or would that fall under a different category here?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Councillor. I would say likely that would be captured not as a COVID call. I could be wrong. If the call was, I have someone in my business, they're refusing to wear a mask, can you come and help? That's a COVID call. If it's, I've been getting death threats because ever since I asked this person to wear a mask, that likely would not be captured as a COVID call, I'm guessing. And I'm looking at Inspector Stevely. We can get clarification on that for you, Councillor, but I think it would likely end up being just categorized as a threatening.
Okay, thank you. Final question about this. There's a huge variance here between the COVID calls by month and the number of tickets by month. What merits a ticket and what doesn't? Is it simply, nosy neighbors calling on somebody down the street suspecting they have more than the number they're allowed to have in their house, please show up. There's actually no problem. Any way to account for this huge variance in the calls versus the tickets?
I think you've done a very good job of it, actually, Councillor. That is what we're finding. We're finding we get a high number of calls with concerns, and when we get there, either the concern is not substantiated there or not founded. There is not a breach of the order, or a lot of the calls we get will be for multiple kids in the park. And so we'll get there and we might find 14 kids on the swings and the play apparatus. Well, we're not doing enforcement in those cases. We actually have had some good examples where we've had conversations with parents who were nearby, just helping them understand what that looks like and how can we try and maintain social distancing and the wearing of masks and those types of things. And so I would say we've had other cases where we're dispatched to a call where it was a report of a breach, and like anything, we try and use good discretion. We don't issue a ticket to every noisy party that we go to outside of COVID. We get dispatched to a lot of noisy parties, and there's a lot of times we can get there and we can say, look, neighbors are concerned about the noise. We ask you to just shut it down. Let's send people on their way, and they will. Sometimes it's very evident to us that people are like very purposefully defying the order. And so it's often in these cases where it's organized, it's been on Facebook, we want people to come down here. In those cases, that is to me and to our organization a defiance of the order. That looks a little different than something that maybe didn't intend to turn out to be a big gathering. We had that happen once here outside of a business where some people stopped and were visiting, and we got a call to that where there was multiple people standing in a circle, essentially having a visit outside of a business. We got there. One of them wasn't wearing a mask. However, they were distanced in a way that we felt it wasn't a breach of the order, and so there was no ticket issued. So it's a lot of different things. I think you hit the nail on the head. A lot of the calls that we go to end up not being something that we would write a ticket for, as it wasn't a violation. Some of the ones that we do go to, we may be able to use discretion, and in some cases we feel that enforcement is necessary.
Perfect. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thanks, Councillor Stevens. Any other members of the board wish to ask any questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much for the information. Can I get a motion to receive and file the report?
So moved, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. And just good work again in terms of drug seizures and whatnot. Pretty consistent effort on your part. I'll call the question. Anyone opposed? Hearing none. Carried. Can I have someone make a motion for private session?
Moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Bither. We'll now recess for 15 minutes. We'll be back at 11:31 to go into private session. Thank you. you.